help me welcome Beerud to the stage. Welcome.
Thanks, John. So I'm going to talk about the web beyond the web, and it seems cryptic, but I'll explain in a second. Firstly, let me start by reassuring John and Tim that I'm not about to announce Web 3.0 here, but talk about some interesting things. So over the last couple of years, I found myself shuttling back and forth a lot between US and India. I live here in the Valley. I previously founded a company called Elance that some of you may have heard of or use. And visiting India and going in and out of the two cultures, apart from the heat and the crowds, the first thing that hits you is when you land, you switch off from email mode and go into SMS mode. SMS is just text messaging or short message service, as they call it in other parts of the world. So, and it's just amazing, even for many folks in the tech industry, it's easy to get quick responses on SMS than it is to get responses on email. And it just works that way. I mean, it's just the predominant culture there. So it just got me thinking that, it's almost the Valley-centric view of the web. And as we think about it, is great. And yet there's a whole different phenomenon happening elsewhere in a way that we don't think about it as much. So let's just start with the simple definition, right? So what is the web? And I'll leave it to the gurus to define it. I mean, there's so many ways to talk about it. But let's just say use a simple functional definition, right? Everything that's built on top of HTTP, the hypertext transfer protocol, and all the cool things, the browser, and so many amazing services that have been built over the last dozen years or so, right? And if you think about it, right, there's about 1.5 billion users worldwide using the web. It's a big number, and so many successful companies, as we all know, have been created around that. And then again, there's this other audience out there of nearly 3.5 billion users, right, whom the web doesn't reach, or the web, as we think about, doesn't get there. They don't see web pages and such, but they all have mobile handsets, and that number, as Mary was talking, was just growing incredibly fast. Would be 5 billion, 6 billion users over the next few years. Just a really large number. I mean, to put it in perspective, it's the most widely adopted piece of modern invention, if you will, compared to even TVs, cars, phones, landline phones, credit cards, what have you. So just a really, really large number. And this disparity is even more pronounced in a country like India, okay, where you have about 30 million. Think about that. For a billion people country, just about 30 million web users, or the PC web users, but 300 million mobile subscribers. And that's growing even faster, right? Adding, as Mary was saying, about 10 million mobile subscribers a month. So it'll be about 500 or 600 million mobile subscribers, probably faster than you'll get to 50 or 60 million web users over the next 3 years, right? And even the disparity is even greater than that because of the time spent on these devices, right? People carry their phones around with them all the time, right? On their way to work, at work, right? Everywhere, literally. And no matter how remote the places are, I mean, these places are all connected by the web. Even when they are with other friends, they're not really there, just using it all the time. And sites like this are not uncommon in parts of Asia. So one might say, well, wait a minute. Isn't the world of the web and the world of mobile converging? I mean, don't you have really smart devices where it all works together and you won't have to worry about it? We'll just expand the web out to all those users out there. Except that if you look deeper into the numbers, you'll see that all of this growth is really coming from smaller towns and villages. And this is just for India, but that's the same in many parts of the world, where these tier 2 and tier 3 towns are, that's where the subscriber growth is coming. All the big cities are already wired up and connected, if you will. And therefore, the handsets that are being purchased are all at the lower end, right? So we're talking about $50 handsets, unsubsidized, meaning that's without a monthly plan, right? And the innovation that's being driven there to further drive adoption is to how do we get that price lower, down to $20, down to $10, and so on, right? So when you look at that, while there's amazing innovation happening at the top of the pyramid, there's another parallel set of innovation happening at the bottom of the pyramid, driven by a wholly different set of factors, right? They're not thinking how do we load it up with features, how do we do cool things, but how do we lower price, how do we drive adoption, how do we connect up the whole world? And for a while, I mean, these things are going to be these two are going to be fairly different, or at least, you know, like I said, the HTTP protocol versus what happens. The lowest common denominator on these handsets is just voice and SMS. It's not that they have web browsers or WAP browsers or anything like that, right? So and the disparity is even starker when you look at the application layer, right? On the web, as we all know, I don't expect you to read the slide, but there's tons of rich services for so many different ways to communicate, to collaborate, to do commerce and so many other things, and newer ways to interact on the web. And what do you have on the mobile world, right? At least on the lowest common denominator handsets. I mean, people talk about ringtones, there's some wallpapers, some voice response mechanisms, but not a lot. I mean, there's a huge dearth of capabilities and services and applications available on this medium. So it's in this context, right, that we launched a service called SMS GupShup. Just to get the jargon right, GupShup is a Hindi word for chit chat, right? You can file that away as another cool word from the language that gave you yoga, nirvana, and Kama Sutra, right? So it's just a good name for a social service, if you will. And what is it, right? It allows any user, any mobile subscriber, to create a group, to invite their friends into the group, and broadcast messages to them, right? One-to-many broadcasting to subscribers. We call it group messaging out there, right? It's basically microblogging. That's how we think about it here. Lots and lots of user-generated text messages, and like John mentioned, so this is the Twitter for India, right? You could think of it that's one way to think about it, except albeit a lot bigger, right? In the 18 months since launch, we're over 12 million users, and we send about 500 million messages a month. To put that in perspective, that's about 7% of India's SMS messaging traffic, right? We are by far the largest publisher or sender of messages to mobile subscribers, and by the way, growing a lot faster than the whole average is growing. So if you just file this away in your mental bucket for Twitter clones, would that, is that the right thing? And I think that would be missing the forest for the trees, because there's something deeper that's going on here. You almost need to shift your frame of reference and sort of imagine a world where, at least on the web, Twitter, for example, is another way to communicate in a rich ecosystem where there are so many other things you can do, right? So when you're searching, you go to another place. When you're shopping, you go to another place. When you're dating and for jobs and so on and so forth, there's so many other options available. And you go to this other ecosystem where there's a huge dearth of interesting and rich applications, right? So for GupShup, so the difference is borne out by many things. So one of the big differences is our service can be used entirely by mobile, the exclusively mobile use case, meaning you don't need to register on the website or even visit the website to use the service. And that's critical, right? Because if you think about it, when we have more users than the entire web population in India, right? Think about that. You can't ask them to go visit the web. It just doesn't work. It has to work on the mobile handset. So you can create groups, you can invite your friends, send messages, and even subscribers can join your group if they hear about it somewhere. They can join entirely through mobile. Now, of course, we have a website and a WAP site for users that do have access to richer devices, and there's many of those as well. But even those users use the website and the WAP site because it's deeply integrated into SMS, which is the lowest common denominator, right? And I think that's one of the key things about social media, where when you're sending invitations to friends, when you're conversing with friends, you will always resort to the lowest common denominator medium, because you can't assume that all of them will receive what you're sending you can't all assume that they have rich phones or smartphones and so on. So very popular, growing very rapidly because it's deeply integrated into the sort of SMS platform, right? And then look at the use cases, right? So who's using it and why? So you'll find lots of news publications sending, updating news via these SMS messages. You'll see a lot of what we call blogging, if you will, passionate individuals just sharing their thoughts and opinions. You'll see a lot of social networking as well. You'll see people trying to connect and find other people. And by the way, SMS is not simply text messaging. It also allows some low-res images and some sounds and so on. So it's almost like sending pokes on Facebook. You can send these kind of greetings on SMS as well. A lot of shopping and commerce that's being triggered by many of these messages. People posting for jobs, looking for jobs and trying to get hired. Matrimonials, which is the Indian-style dating, if you will. A lot of that happening as well. Alerts for traffic, for exams, all kinds of stuff. Party invitations going through the system as well. A lot of spiritual content. Jokes and entertainment is a big thing. Games starting to grow as well. Just lots of other stuff. And here's another sort of unique Indian adaptation where while most devices don't support local Indian languages, and by and large, most people don't speak English, so the hybrid solution is to have local languages in English font that these people would read phonetically and understand what it means in their own language. And you probably won't be able to understand what that means there. So it just all kinds of interesting stuff going on. So that, to me, if there's one takeaway, that's the high order bit here, in that in the absence of other ways to, other applications, other rich services, we are discovering that all the web use cases that we think about, right, jobs and social networking and dating and such, all of that's happening. They're surprisingly similar. The use cases or the things that people do are surprisingly similar to what we think of, or what we think of the web as, but all of it compressed into 160 characters just on a simple short text message. In the process of this usage, we collect rich user profiles, right? So we know who's a college student, we know who's a business person, who's a stock trader, so on and so forth. And that drives towards business models, which are also interestingly similar to the web. Certainly you can do contextual and targeted advertising by text ads inside the messages. Even the social interactions are monetizable. That's the good thing about the mobile medium, where incoming and outgoing calls as well as messages can be monetized. They don't have to, they could be free or monetizable. And also commerce, enabling buying, shopping, a variety of things, auctions and such. There's a lot of opportunities there as well. So, I think there's a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurs in the audience here as well, because the entire ecosystem of the web that was built over the last few years here is going to need to be rebuilt, if you will, albeit in a different medium, with a different form factor for different devices and different protocols, but essentially the same things. And we've sort of seen the movie, and it won't play out exactly the same way, but I think it's rich with opportunities. It's a huge, massive audience. They're not doing many of these things that they want to do. The demand's there, so long as we make it able. So I think that's it. I just wanted to, that was my thoughts. It's sort of like, discovering extraterrestrial life, right? There's another planet out there apart from our own, and I think there is another web beyond what we think of as the web. Thanks.